Hi, welcome back. If you're new here, my name's Natalia, and today I wanted to do a quick check-in on my winter crochet and knitting plans and see how I'm doing since my last video that outlined what I was planning to do this season. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'll start with crochet first and then I'll go into knitting. So for crochet, since I announced the plans, I finished I think it was called the Picot scarf. It's a free pattern. There's a YouTube tutorial. She also has a written pattern on her blog. I think it's called the Turtle Trunk. And I finished and I've sewed it up, so this was in rows instead of rounds. And I got a little annoyed by how the colors worked up just because they were in a perfect line and then just barely changing as I went row by row. But I've worn it a couple times already, and once you double it up around your neck, all the colors mixed together, so it's plenty fine. When I did attach it, obviously this is the most glaring of the color difference just because it's worked in rows, and I'm okay with it. So again, I just hide this part when I put it on, and it's been completely fine. I really like how it turned out overall. I don't think I'll make another one just because there are other patterns that I would like to try, but I'm pretty happy that this was my first attempt at doing a textured type of scarf. So I enjoyed it. I would still recommend the pattern, and I was really happy that my math worked out so accurately because I only used a single cake. I think it's called the Caron cake. Let me see. The Caron cinnamon swirl cake in the color Jelly Bean, and I had worked out the math to have just a little bit left. So this is all that's left of the cake that I used. So pretty happy to see that I did that math correctly. So this is the first item that I finished of, I think this was kind of a carryover from fall, really. I just hadn't finished it up, but this was just a couple weeks into winter that I did wrap up. The second crochet item that I'm working on is actually a blanket, and I do think this will take me much longer than a scarf, certainly. I don't know that I'll even finish it this winter. I'll probably just carry it into next winter, especially because it hasn't been that cold here in Seattle. So as I'm working up this blanket and it's starting to sit on my lap, I'm noticing it's actually quite warm. So I'll continue working on it as long as I'm enjoying it and it's not making me too warm. And then if I'm done with it, great, then I can use it. If I'm not, I'll just carry it into next winter. So this was a pattern that I shared, I think the design, so I just tried to come up with something on my own for an overlay mosaic design. And I just came up with squares, essentially. So I wanted something pretty simple just to feel comfortable with the technique because I want to make this bookcase overlay mosaic crochet blanket. And I really do want to get proficient with the stitch itself before I dive into this one, because as beautiful as this is, it's going to be a one and done for me. I'm not going to make multiple of this one. So it's beautiful. I will make it to my liking, but that is it because it's a ton of work. So I wanted to just really practice, but I also wanted to keep something that I was making. So I'm making it pretty simple. I did make it quite big. So this will be a very nice long throw that I can have on the couch. And I've been making this in the reversible stitch, and I'm actually learning that I'm not quite a fan of how it turns out on the back. And I'm wondering if I should just keep it stripes on the back and just make sure to anchor it so I don't get those flaps that overlay mosaic typically has. But on the back, you can very much see that it is the back simply because the reverse stitch, it doesn't fully cover up the back row. And from far away, you're not going to see it, but it does bother me a little bit, enough that I don't think it might be worth the extra effort. So I'll continue working on this. This is the width, so there's a lot of length to go still. I'll continue working on it, and depending on how it actually finishes up, how it turns out at the end, I'll decide for the bookcase blanket if I want to do the reversible stitch or if I just want to anchor the flaps and not worry about doing it reversible. So this one I actually completely ended up changing from the design that I had shared in my planning video. It is still a square design, but instead of dots, I went with a line in between, so slightly different. The design that I had created didn't quite apply, but honestly at this point I'm so many rows into it that I can just look below and figure out what I need to do next. So I'm not really following a pattern anymore. I'm just going with the flow on this one. But I do really like how soft and warm and thick this is going to be, especially with that reversible stitch. So those are actually my only 2 crochet projects. I really wanted to try and figure out knitting in the winter because I do want to get proficient at knitting sweaters. That's something that I've really been looking forward to. And so a lot of my time has been spent knitting in the last couple of weeks instead of crochet. So the first project that I finished is actually a beanie. And this was my first non-testing actual project that I knitted. It was knit in a size 6, so super bulky yarn. And it's a very simple, just 1x1 ribbing at the top, at the bottom, and then stockinette stitch all the way to the top, and then you just cinch it closed. It was fine. I think it turned out fine. I think my stitches have pretty even tension, enough that I felt comfortable moving on to starting my first sweater with a bulky yarn. I do think a sweater with a thinner yarn will require a bit more practice just to make sure that my tension is quite even. But the beanie itself, I think, turned out fine. It fits me fine. I don't know yet if I'll keep it or if I'll donate it, but I'm pretty happy with my practice and having this done so that I could move on to other things that I also want to try. The pattern was by Sewrella, if I'm not mistaken. It's also a free pattern that she had on her blog, so I'll make sure to link that in the description box as well. So this was my very first knitting project completed, and then I have a couple that are also work in progress. So my second knitting project is a sweater. It's with the same yarn. So the yarn is from Lion Brand. It's the Wool Ease super bulky yarn in the color Fisherman, I think. And this is the Fall Bluff sweater by Ashley Lillis. I had mentioned her tutorial video a couple times before, and I'll make sure it's in the description box as well. But this is my first attempt at a sweater. It's a raglan, so pretty even increases all around. You start at the neck and grow from there. And I am, I think, just a couple inches away from being done with the increases. So you've got the neck 1x1 ribbing right here, and then it just goes into stockinette, and then eventually it'll separate for the armholes, and I'll just finish knitting the body and then go back and pick up the stitches for the arms. Like I said, I am just a couple inches away from getting to the arm separation. Oh, it's inside out. There we go. I was wondering why it looked so different from the last time I checked. So purling is on the inside, the actual knit stitch is on the outside. But yeah, I'm almost done with the increases, and then I will separate the arms out and continue working on the body. Again, I feel pretty comfortable working with this thick yarn. I think my tension is pretty good. I don't have any issues with like dropped stitches. Anytime I drop it, I did learn how to fix those. So it's going pretty well. It's knitting. It takes a lot longer than crochet, or at least my experience with crochet. And it is a full-blown sweater. So I do expect that it'll take me a bit longer. With that, I think I've been working on this for a couple of weeks. I'm maybe 15, 20 hours into it. I know it'll take me a long time, especially for my first one, but I think it's going well. It's just sitting on the needles and attached to the yarn, and I'll just keep going, and hopefully we'll finish this before winter is over. And then lastly, the last knitting project that I have is also a beanie. It is a much thinner yarn, so this is a size 4. It's from the Caron Simply Soft. So it is a size 4 acrylic yarn in the color gray, and this is the Musselburgh beanie that is extremely popular on Ravelry. I think it's got something like over 30,000 projects to it, and it was a challenge. I actually bought the pattern thinking that it was a bit more beginner friendly than I had realized, and I think casting on the pinhole start, it probably took me about 3 hours of fighting with it, trying to figure it out, watching a ton of YouTube tutorials, watching from the creator herself and a bunch of other people who have made it, and it was just not clicking. And I essentially gave up, went to bed, walked away from it, and the next morning it just clicked. I'm not sure what changed. I think I must have just been tired, but I watched one of the videos again, and using the magic circle on a very long cable just all of a sudden worked. And so I just kept going. I did drop a stitch very early on, and because it's such a thin yarn and it was so small, it was easier to just undo and get started again. So I did that. And since then, I mean, I do drop stitches every now and then, and I just go ahead and fix it, but it's turning out quite well. I'm pretty happy with it. I put a lifeline on just yesterday because I wanted to take it off the needles to try it on. I was not trusting the process because on the 16-inch circular needles, I was just not seeing how this was going to fit anybody's head. So I did take it off the needles yesterday, put a lifeline on and tried it on, and it is fitting just fine. It'll actually probably be a little bit loose on my head, which I'm fine with. I don't like super tight beanies, or I'll gift it to somebody or donate it. Either way is okay. But this is giving me a lot of practice. The thinner yarn does mean it's going to take a longer time. It takes a lot more rows, but I'm just going through and getting used to essentially building that muscle memory for knitting. And I'm starting to get to the point where I don't have to particularly pay very close attention to the stitches as I'm making them. So I'm now able to watch TV, listen to an audiobook, and pay closer attention to that than I am paying attention to the knitting itself. So I'm pretty happy with how it's going. I've gone ahead and already closed up the top and weaved that end in. And I've got, I think, about another 2.5 inches to go. I think I'm actually going to deviate from the pattern just because of all the YouTube tutorials that I watched. I did like the style where the part that flips up is done in a 1x1 ribbing. And so I've gone ahead and figured out how many inches do I need before I switch to the 1x1 ribbing. In the middle of that, I need to switch to a different color. So I've got a navy blue that I think will go really well with this gray. And I think it's going to be about 6 inches of stockinette stitch, and then switch to 1x1 ribbing, do 3 inches of that, and then another 3 inches in the new color, and then switch to just knitting in the round until I start decreasing for the other crown. So pretty happy with it. It's nice and soft, and I think once you've got that double layered with the 1x1 ribbing flipped up, I think it'll be actually really warm. So pretty happy with it. Happy to be getting all of these rounds in and all of the practice and building that muscle memory. And then I think I'm always going to end up having some sort of beanie on my needles just because it's pretty mindless. It's good practice for a new size of yarn. So I finished the size 6 and then jumped into a size 6 yarn sweater. This is a size 4. I will likely try to make maybe a size 2 beanie and try to figure out which yarn size I want to attempt for a sweater itself, because the sweater does take so many more balls of yarn that I just want to feel a bit more comfortable in figuring out what size of yarn do I prefer to work with and do I think actually would feel nice for me to wear as a sweater. So I'll keep working on this. I'll wrap it up, probably jump into the exact same pattern now that I've got it down and I know how to get started with a size 2. And then if it's still winter, I will attempt a sweater, probably just something very simple like a raglan, just simple everyday type of sweater that I can try either with a size 4 or a size 2 depending on how I like it. So those are all my crochet and knitting projects so far for the winter. It's only been a couple weeks. I think it's been maybe about a month since I posted my plans. No amigurumis, so no crochet plushies this time. I might have to throw one in there just because I miss making a toy essentially. So I might have to come up with one. Maybe I'll still go back and make the Mack the Moose in some sort of Christmas winter snowflake style. I also saw this cushion in a magazine for crochet on Libby that I really, really liked. I think it's really pretty. So maybe instead of an amigurumi toy, I'll make this cushion instead and try my hand at that. That would certainly be a first for me. But so far, I think between the beanie and the sweater and the overlay mosaic crochet blanket, I have 3 work in progress items. So that's usually even potentially more than I like to have on hand, just because I get distracted and forget they exist. So maybe I'll start the cushion, maybe not. Maybe I'll want to finish one of these before I pick up another one. So we'll see how it goes. But with that, thank you so much for dropping by, and I'll probably do another check-in in another 2, 3, 4 weeks and see how these projects are moving along. So thank you for dropping by, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.